last 10. I haven't worked on land issues that much, other than I chair the coastal marine working group and for the climate council, where we obviously talk a lot about working waterfront and some of the resilience. I'm very well into this group. So.
You have a good sense of humor like that.
Try not.
I don't think this group will get you too riled up.
Yeah.
We're very gentle.
You don't have any lobstering wounds to show us?
Scars, yeah.
Yeah. You know what today is, though.
Yes, I do. I know.
What is it, National Lobster Day?
No,
Almost.
close.
Almost.
Close.
Lobster Newberg Day.
Oh.
Oh, that's an obscure.
Okay, well, I'm Barbara Trafton and I'm from Brunswick.
I'm Beth Schiller, a public member from Bodenham.
I'm Roger Burley, public member from Cliff Island.
I'm Heather Beal. I'm the commissioner of the Department of Agriculture, Conservation and Forestry.
Right, let's go to Mac next.
Yes, Matt Hunter, public member from Amherst, Maine. I think the last time I met Carl was on a coral reef ecology class in the Yucatan. Is that correct, Carl?
Yes, that is correct. Yeah.
Okay. It's been a while.
It has.
Sounds like a good
It was
class.
a very good class. Yeah.
Catherine, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning. My name is Catherine Robbins Halstead. I'm a public member from Searsmont, and nice to meet you, Carl. And welcome aboard.
Laura Graham, Director of Land for Maine's Future.
Joseph Anderson, Senior Planner.
Jason Goulet, Senior Planner.
Lucia Liggio, Office Specialist. Brianna Parisian, Secretary Assistant. Audrey INW. Justin Benson, INW too.
You want to introduce yourself?
And Beth Valentine, I'm the Director of the PFAS Fund at Maine DACF.
Dan Grenier, Bureau of Parks and Land.
Rex Turner, Bureau of Parks and Lands.
All right, we can't see anybody. Looks like they're just members of the public online. Yeah. All right. So there should be a per diem form. So just a reminder to submit your per diem forms and give them to Laura before we go. And I think the first action item on our agenda is acceptance of the board minutes.
And will we accept?
Second.
All right, any discussion? Anyone opposed to the? Okay. Board minutes accepted. Laura, gonna walk us through some fund
I
balance?
sure am, with so much pleasure. This is everybody's favorite slide. And I want to say that when that 8569 is zero, you won't see this slide anymore. And it will be zero on April 1st.
Wow.
So, or very, because we have it already journaled over to BPL. So the fund balances, up top, you see what's left of our bond, and below, in very small print, you see what's left in the checkbook. And this is the view you would get if you went to your ATM and saw your bank balance. It doesn't have any idea what checks you've written or what debits you've got pending, right? So this is just that, what's showing up in the account. On the bottom right, that's the total amount. I don't believe that total amount there, I know, does not include interest. I know that 23,760 does not include interest. And on the left, you'll see what we have interest earned, the 2,143,323. And we have the restricted gift fund that's a little under 23,000, and the unrestricted, which is a little under 357,000. So that's that slide. I will pause if there are any questions, Madam Chair. But
And what's up? I just can't see the interest earned this interest.
oh yeah,
It's 2 million.
yeah, it's on the bottom left. I know, I don't like this slide either. So, okay. And there's more money talk. Okay, this is easier to see. These are just, as they say, the unallocated funds. And so this is what we have left to spend. We have exactly $5,000 in working farmland. That's inclusive of set aside, so all in 5,000. We have a little over 1.2 million in working waterfront. For water access, we have a little under 1.8 million. And for round 13, we made a point of voting to say there'd be 3 million. This is a $3 million round. Now that doesn't include, you see at the bottom, again, those interest bits. We have already allocated to round 13, that 342,718 to get us to 3 million because we were otherwise out of money. And we've allocated to the farmland program, 185,392. Those numbers, I'll tell you, move what we've allocated, always down, never up. As I go through and clean and reconcile and we have more money, obviously my understanding is you wanted to move only as much out of interest as we needed. So those numbers hopefully will go down in the more I scrub. But today we have 1.615213 unallocated. And you see on the left side, the darker yellow, those are inclusive of set asides, and for the benefit, for Carl's benefit, and anybody else who finds this confusing, set asides are the amounts we forecast and budget for the legal costs, which are actually only 3% of that 15%. The inventories we do with MNAP and historic commission, plus another 5% each for access improvement grants and stewardship grants. So they're not administrative costs. You know, I wouldn't want, that's something I heard once at the legislature, and I just was like, no, they're not. So they're not administrative. They're fully 10% of these allocated are supplemental grants. And so that's what we do. And so in the figures on the left, those are factored in, those are budgeted for in those yellow ones. And there is yet another financial slide. Yes.
Sorry, when you say moving funds.
Yeah, it's
They're
a
not,
figure of speech.
right,
Nothing
it's all
interesting.
staying in the interest bearing account, right?
Yeah, not in my checkbook.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Good.
exactly
Just
right.
wanted
It's
to make
all
sure we were
totally
still, it's just moving on paper. to
That's
show
right.
us.
That's right.
Got it.
Thank you.
And Laura, the bottom right-hand portion of that slide, interest
Yes,
meaning unallocated.
yes,
Okay, so that's after the 3 million for CR 13 and
that's
all
right.
the other
That's right.
sums above, that's what we have left
Exactly.
in the interest bearing account.
Exactly.
Okay.
If you take that 2.14323 on the left and
Yeah.
subtract those, you get
Okay.
the other.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Very good.
thank you.
Any other questions on this slide?
Okay. And now this is the round 13 and this is being shown for financial purposes. And I realized as I was doing this, I'm supposed to be a little bit cognizant of confidentiality. We're not really supposed to be broadcasting, here are these, da, 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 da. So you won't see the names of the projects. You won't see the applicants. You won't see a lot of things about them, but I thought it was fair to let you know, these are the towns we've got projects, potential proposals in. These are the counties, these are the potential acres. These are the board requests, and there's the estimated match. So you can see that 3,747,000, and I can't see that as 989 maybe.
Yep, that's right.
Oh, good. Okay. Ooh. That's more than 3 million. You can see that.
That's the ask.
That's the request.
Yeah. What
That's
was
a
it
total
again?
with
3.9.
3.747999. Yeah,
Yeah, 999.
999. Yeah, good.
Sorry, what's the difference between what's in green above it?
Yeah, the green, the estimated element request are those straight acquisition costs. Here's how much, and then on the far right, those are the set asides. And, I'm sorry, on the far right, that's match. What you don't see is the column that I used to add the set asides to create sorry. Okay, that helpful?
Mhm.
Okay, cool. Next slide. I can't really remember if there's another. Oh, yeah, yet another. Okay, and then I think this is it for, another way of looking at it. This is the number of active projects and what we have allocated to each of those active projects. And if you follow from like the last board meeting, you'll see that we had 41 active projects. It's a little tricky sometimes when we have, because one of the projects that closed was half a project. It was like one phase of a project that is a single project. So yeah, this isn't my fave either, but that's what we got. Okay, next slide.
Can I just, so to go back to that other slide, with the projects that are
Oh,
coming in.
yes, that one, yeah.
So the set asides include the stewardship monies. Is that
Exactly.
correct? Yeah.
Right, exactly.
If they all ask for stewardship money,
If
we
it's
don't
just-
know
We
that.
don't know.
Yeah,
That's right. And this time, which is unusual, usually we estimate that as 15% because we don't know what the value of things are. But somebody, and I think it was probably Jason, put the estimated value of the land. So these, I think, are actually estimated using our new allocation system, like, 5% of the first 200,000, and more complicated. So Catherine.
fairly accurate.
Yeah.
if Everyone.
It's not presupposing anything, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you don't have to do anything with this today, it's just information, it's.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mac has a question.
I'm sorry, Mac. Go ahead.
Yeah, these numbers compared to the $3 million we were looking at a moment ago, these suggest that we have requests that are 200,000 plus over the 3 million, or 700,000 relative to the 3 million.
It's 747,999 over the 3 million, because the 3 million was inclusive of all
Okay.
costs.
Yeah, and and then the follow-on question obviously is, if we really wanted to approve all these projects, we could do that by dipping in further into the interest fund. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Laura, is this normal that you would have, I mean, it's a little bit over the allocated amount, but I mean, previous rounds, did you have 3 times more than requested than?
Great question. In previous rounds, we really didn't. We had, this is how much money we have. We didn't say, oh, we have 3 million this round. We had whatever was allotted to us. So in the way the 40 million worked, you could disperse up to 10 million each year as it went along, they accumulated. So by the time we were like last year, everybody knew we had how much, I can't remember how much, we had all of it. So we potentially would have spent 3/4 of it last year. So we haven't had to say this round is 3 million. We had to do that this year because we need to pull money forward out of interest to have anything. We didn't want to have a round that was like, well, here's maybe $2.5 million. Board wanted it to be like, okay, it's this, because they could see the interest accruing. So in fact, how this rates for previous requests in other rounds in terms of amount requested, I want to say it's a little low, but maybe it's low average.
It's a little lower, and I don't know if that reflects some applicants holding back, knowing that funds were limited.
Yeah.
I know some applicants have sort of talked in that way, but I don't know if they actually did or not.
Yeah.
So have you ever had to rank for, your review process? I mean, is it
Yeah.
winners and losers, so to speak?
Yes. Yes, we have. And that's going to be the fun part of scoring.
So we'll have a process and staff will do some recommended scoring, and then we as board all score, and then we have a meeting where we kind of combine them and come up with final scores. And some projects might not get funded, or some might not get fully funded.
Yep.
Yeah. And we have, those are the funds allocated to the Conservation Recreation Fund. We have different funding for the water access, as you'll see a project today, working waterfront, that's a separate fund, and working farmland. These are all discrete. So saving here doesn't help us over there and vice versa. I'm sure you already knew that.
At the last meeting, we referenced wanting to have an intentional discussion about how we use that interest and anticipating that we may or may not be in a position of being like, well, there's this extra money over here. I'm wondering where that conversation sits, if it's been allocated to a time and place, or if it's happened between the good staff with a recommendation, or how as a board, I guess I just want to flag that.
Yeah.
It might be nice to have that before we get into the position of
Scoring.
making it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the next meeting is when we will be scoring.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. Oh, well, the next meeting, the very next meeting is when you will be hearing presentations.
Okay.
The day at, 2 days after, you'll be actually scoring, but you'll be reading and scoring.
So maybe if there's time on the agenda today, we could do that. Huge agenda, so.
Yeah. Think. I think we're up to project updates. You want me to?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
Recently closed projects, you can see those are pictures from up at the top is Sea Meadow, that's working waterfront. On the bottom, now I'm gonna get them backwards, I put the photos in there, one of those is Keyser South and one of those is Mill Hill, they're both rivers. I don't know anymore.
Pretty
I
simple.
should have labeled them. Apologies.
There you go.
There you go. Oh, thank you, Joe. Joe can cover this. Fine.
Yeah, so there's, 3 projects, lower right, the Sea Meadow Marine Foundation closed January 23rd. It's 11.4 acres of working waterfront.
Where is
And that's
that?
like, right off.
In
the-
Yarmouth.
Yeah, Yarmouth and Route 1, you can almost see that it's like Dave's crab meat, that I
Oh.
drive by and you look down, you can see some mass sticking up and, I wasn't familiar with the project until we were doing this and I was pretty impressed. The Keys and River South on the lower left, that closed on January 29th. That was an allocation of $1,035,000. It was a large project. 1,400 acres with the Keezer River and snowmobile trails and, just a huge block. And then up, just slightly northeast of that is the Mill Hill, which was part of the Edward Mill Hill. Goes to the second phase. This is a 1,293 acre parcel, which with, Edward Mill, a continuous protected corridor of 2,345 acres. And this was $1,225,000 allocation. So two large projects that are complete now, and that just closed, last Thursday, 3/20.
Joe, any questions?
Okay. And before we started with this one, you and I talked, Judy, about, I wanted to give a brief intro on this. This is the second proposal you've seen from the town of Brunswick for water access that involves a match parcels that were pre-acquired by the town some time ago. The first one was Merry Meeting Park, and that in which the tax parcels, the islands that became part of the Merry Meeting Park water access proposal, which I got were such a pivotal crowning jewel of that, had been acquired through tax taking like 20 years in the past. This one's going to be similar to that. That one, they didn't seek funding. They didn't seek any value for those match parcels. This one, they are seeking. They're going to contribute these. They are seeking. And then another situation in which you have much shorter time frame, but another town was the Eastern Trail and Cottontails. The match parcel was the thing that people were most excited about. That had been pre-acquired some time ago. And so we've been talking as staff about whether you might want to distinguish between municipalities when they hold land and pre-acquire land. It's no more protected than if I owned it, versus a cooperating entity that has their own charge to, like, you don't have to worry about it so much. And towns are much less in control of some of these things when they own them and what they do. And so whether you would want, not a decision today, but you want to send your staff off to go do some research and come back to you with recommendations about whether or not we ought to distinguish between municipalities and cooperating entities what is ostensibly a 2-year pre-acquisition rule. If you've acquired something 2 years, longer than 2 years, you can't bring it as match, it doesn't count as match, and you can't get funding for it. So that is my little intro before you look at this project.
So a couple questions. When a municipality is using land that they pre-acquired as match
Yeah,
and adding some financial value to that, and this part is part of this process, does that land then become permanently conserved?
yes. Oh, yes, I left out the most important part. The way this came about with the first Merry Meeting Park was that the town of Brunswick had been thinking, oh, we want to do a project agreement with you, LMF, for the land side, the shore side. And I guess it's on us. We're going to have to go and put a conservation easement on these islands. And I said, oh, no, you don't. You pull it into match. It gets protected by our project agreement. It's good. We like that.
Mhm.
And so thank you for that opportunity to clarify. Yeah.
And then one, if I can, just a request to, there are some similar provisions, for the Knocker councils that I sit on where land, previously acquired or donated can be used as match. And if we could just look at, or if you could look into how long they allow that for.
Okay.
It's certainly more than 2 years, though.
Okay.
I think it's more like 10. So
Okay.
just have some comparables of how some of our
Okay.
federal.
We can look into that. Yeah.
And
Okay.
then Barbara, and then I think Catherine has her hand up.
So, Laura, on municipally owned lands, there's no clock running on when those lands could be used.
There is a clock. Our workbook says 2 years. You all have the ability to waive that.
Okay.
And
so
that's
we
what
would have
you've
to
done.
waive that today, is what you're saying.
Today, you would need to, just like you did with Merry Meeting Park, you
Yeah.
have to waive that.
Okay.
But this is what made us think like, hey, does this make sense to take a look? Because they are different. And I know there's some municipalities that are kind of excited about this as a planning tool. This is a sort of a cheaper, and we like project agreements. They're kind of like an easement light, they really are a permanent interest in land that protects it forever. So something to think about.
Catherine?
Thank you. Yes, I had actually sent a question to Laura, so I appreciate you bringing this up because I think it would be good to have staff give us their thoughts on the municipality-owned properties being used for match, because I had some questions on it, like when was the appraisal going to be done and et cetera, and how do you value that where it's already municipality-owned and if there's other prior restrictions on it, et cetera. So I would really welcome the thoughts from staff on how to handle this so we could have some guidance going forward. Thank you.
And the match parcels, just like any other LMF project, will need to be appraised.
Okay.
That's not changing. Yeah. Yeah, I guess Joe gets.
Go for it, Joe.
All right, well, thank you for the little discussion there, appreciate that. Let you know that, Tom Farrell, the Director of Parks and Lands for the town of Brunswick, is with us today and can be available for questions after the presentation. This is Peterscott Reservoir access and Androscoggin River. In Brunswick, kind of north on the Androscoggin towards the Durham line. It's a mix of fields and forests. So 77 total acres, 45 acres will be in the green. In this, that's the Settlemire, and then these are the match lands that run along the shoreline. Settlemire property will be acquired in fee, and the town will encumber all 77 acres with a project agreement. And this will create that significant block along the river, which is part of comprehensive plan for Brunswick, is to protect as much of that Androscoggin river that they can, that land. And then this will also give secure access from River Road, Town Road, to those lands.
So can you, go back? And so the portion in yellow that's running the length of the river, how wide is that?
I just have acreage, so I'm not sure of the width of it, how far. That's something we can ask Tom, they have that,
Yeah, it'd be helpful to know, is that like a 75 foot, 100 foot, 150 feet?
Right. I don't know.
we'll follow up with Tom.
Great.
for that. But we do have the distance, 1.6 miles of shoreline, along that Androscoggin River, Deep Scott Reservoir. So they're allowing fishing, swimming, birding, hunting, picnicking, hiking, habitat. There is an opportunity to place a trail along that section of shoreline. One piece we wanted to bring to your attention too was M&AT, their pre-acquisition review, identified a sludge using resistance site and an additional site 22 miles to the west. So that's in this this is that field section. This is field one, and there was an additional site that was recognized just to the 2.2 miles to the west. Tom did supply us with Northern Tilt engineering firm out of Belfast. It did soil testing on that site in 2022. And they found only one PFAS of the 28 compounds was registered. The others were all non-detectable. This one was at level 0.379 nanograms per gram. And so I started looking at what the background and say in a land that has not been, not non-agricultural, that has not had sludge spread. And for Maine, this is the 2003 PFAS screening levels. Is showing for a park user, which is equates to a park would be 0.49. That's milligrams per kilogram. So that's parts per million. This is parts per billion. So would actually be 0.000379. The testing results, they make the reason it was so low that they're thinking that though this site was licensed, it was licensed between 1985 and 1990. But however, the examination of DEP's publicly available land application spreadsheet reveals no records of actual spreading events. It said it was not uncommon for some field to be licensed but never spread. So that's a testing that shows that's a 2022. And the budget. And this is 7 Mile property. That's from a 2024 full appraisal. The match parcels, those are based on assessed value. For a total cost of $715,000. And the match bargain sale. Again, the assessed value of the match parcels and grants and donations. So the funding request is for $357,500.
So wait, can you go back? So, but they already own the match parcels, right?
That's
So 357 that they're asking for is more than 50% of the Settlemire property.
mhm. Okay. That's usually how we calculate match. That's the idea, is to give them credit, like we did for Eastern Trailing Cottontails. We included the value of those match
Yeah.
parcels. Yeah, and that's normally how we calculate project
Yeah.
cost. But it's the distinction is that this is their reacquired a long time ago.
Yeah.
And that's that conversation.
And Tom is available for any questions, should the board decide.
Catherine, do you have a question? If you're on mute.
Sorry,
Catherine.
yeah, sorry, I just realized that. I see that the match parcel, it says the assessed value Is that going to be appraised by an outside appraiser, or are we just going off of the tax assessor's value of the property? And my question was also going to, I thank you for the information on the cottontail, because I also had a question as to if we actually assigned value to a matched parcel, giving funds on it. And then my other question, so I'll make it two parts, the one on the how to get the value verified on the 200,000, and the other one under the hunting. It says a person shall not hunt, trap, or disturb wildlife on this property. Given the image, it looks like it's very narrow, so I'm assuming that's why, because I know we talked strongly about having hunting, fishing, trapping open on LMF parcels. Thank you.
The first question, will require, the match parcels to be appraised, I'm sorry. The assessed parcels to be appraised. And on the second question, and Tom and I spoke on this too about the hunting, in the proposal, it does say that fishing, hunting, boating will be allowed. So we brought that, Tom has also included the ordinance in the proposal. And under section 14-135, it does say that the lead off, a person shall not hunt, trap, or disturb wildlife. As you read on towards the bottom of the paragraph, there is an exception. Exception of this section is hunting with bow, shotgun, or black powder is allowed on the Cape Furbish Preserve property, which they would add this property to that exception.
So they will be allowing hunting.
Yes. Yes, per town ordinance.
But that Cape Furbush, that is not this property though. That is an abutting property, or that is this property, the Cape Furbush?
No, it's a separate property. It's not part of this.
I think they would just have to add this in as an amendment to the ordinance.
Okay, sorry, thank you.
Trying to play catch up here. The match parcels are in the cost and in the match.
That's right.
And I'm just restating, I think what I heard earlier is they're in the cost because if you went out and bought all of that property, that's what it would cost. And they're in the match because the applicant is trying to demonstrate that they're have in-kind services. Okay, so, and if assessed value is different than the actual, retail value, I guess, then the costs are gonna go up and the match is gonna go up as well. Okay.
That's right. And the board in the past has exercised its discretion to say, we're gonna hold you to your first statement, we will never pay more than 50% of appraised fair market value. But they have said in the past, from time to time, but we're not gonna pay, but we will pay less than that. If you go get an appraisal and it shows that assessed value at 200,000 is a fifth of what it is, the board isn't necessarily committed to upping their contribution.
And why include the match parcels on the top and on the bottom?
Yeah,
They're just canceling each other out.
It's took me a long time. So your total project costs are literally all of what they're bringing to the table and all of what we're providing. It's all of it together is like the total project value. And what they're bringing is in the form of real estate, not cash, right? So you have to, so with that as your guide, this is the total project, right? We'll pay 50% of that total project. That's probably the best way to think about it. So that's why you have it in the top layer, because that's how you determine 50%. 50% of what is that total?
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yep. And so LMF will pay up to 50%.
Up to 50% appraised fair market value. Yeah. Board has a ton of discretion.
It's this similar principle to why we allow the bargain sale amount to be counted as part of the match too. So the bargain sale amount of 50,000 in this case is being donated by Mr. Settlemeyer, who owns the parcel that will be acquired.
if you think about the citizens, we're getting the benefit of all this.
Mhm.
So that's why, and there's some board members who are really keen to see more than 50% match, more, this is like more bang for the buck. Like we pay $1, we get $5 back.
And I think Catherine felt, I think any number have indicated that there'll be a full appraisal of this assessed lands. And I think we know from previous transactions that assessed values usually underestimate the actual value of a property.
Yes.
But I'd like to go to Judy's question to Tom. I'd like to know more about this skinny parcel going along the river.
It's okay to open it up to Tom?
If he could answer that question, that would be great, yeah.
Yeah, the width of the town strip varies along the narrow section you see on the map. It varies between 150 and 200 feet in width.
Thank you. Yeah, go forward.
And Tom, how is that currently being used? Is it for bank fishing? Is that essentially what's being done along that whole strip of land?
I think that's probably some of the more significant uses for bank fishing. However, there are people that will walk from the residences around there. There's a trail or a footpath along the waterfront itself, but it's only accessible from the properties immediately adjacent to it.
And going forward, the intent would be to open that up to the public.
Correct. We would actually, in the application, we indicated that I think in the second year, we would intend to put a 10-car gravel parking area on the south side of the parcel where you see the skinniest road frontage, just inside where it starts to open up. We would put in a parking lot accessible like we have at a couple other LMF project sites we've had. The Greater Commons area is one in particular, and McCoy Bay Conservation Lands. We've had that same kind of pattern for access and parking. It calls for 10 vehicles, one handicap spot. And for these types of parcels, that seems to handle the capacity quite well.
Any other questions, Barbara?
Tom, you mentioned in the application bald eagles and blue herons. Are there nests? Are there no nests along this strip? And is there a rookery for blue herons here?
I'm not aware of one anywhere along this stretch, but I have seen both along this stretch of the river. But I'm not aware of a rookery anywhere in terms of where herons might roost, and I'm not aware of any bald eagle nests either on this stretch.
Barbara, last time.
Just shut me off anytime. Tom, you call this a reservoir project. How far does the reservoir, which is really the impoundment, how far does that extend? Does it extend to is there any free-flowing Androscoggin River here, or is it a total impoundment?
Well, the next dam upstream is at Lisbon Falls. The entire area between there and what is known as the Warumbo Dam, there's free-flowing water. There's still free-flowing water at the very northerly end of the town's, of the town's property here you see. That's just downriver of the bridge that goes from Durham into Lisbon Falls. So you're just a short ways downstream from the Warumbo Dam. In terms of mileage, I really don't know, and I would not want to hazard an incorrect guess on how far it is from the Pejebskit Dam, which you see in the picture here, to the Warumbo Dam upstream.
So largely because essentially the whole thing is an impoundment. That's why the species of fish that you mentioned really no salmon. It's really perch and sunfish and things like that. It's It's like, to me, it's more like a lake, what I'm used to in a lake. There's not much is getting through the Pajevscott Dam, even though there's a fishway. Is that correct?
I would say that that's accurate. It's a warm water fishery. Largest percentage of fish in this stretch are warm water. It's quite a prolific smallmouth bass fishery, very popular. There is a boat landing on the Lisbon side of the river below the Warumbo Dam that gives you access to this stretch of the river. It's fished primarily by bass fishermen, but I will tell you that we're working currently with a number of entities. A group that's formed more recently in the last year is called Free the Androscoggin. And the Brunswick Dam downtown is currently up for relicensing. The FERC relicense date is 2029. And we're looking to try to get natural fish passage around that dam, which is the first one fish encounter when they're coming from the ocean. The Pajevscott Dam would be the second dam upstream from the one we're working on right now with the regulatory agency to try to get improved fish passage. There are Atlantic salmon that get to Pajevscott Dam. Each year, Brunswick has a facility in the dam itself where the fish that are coming up the fish ladder are monitored. And we do know that Atlantic salmon do make it past the dam in Brunswick. I'm not aware of any that go up through the Pajevscott fish lift. So there's a staircase kind of flowing dam at the Brunswick Dam. When you get to Pajevscott, it's an elevator type lift. The fish swim into an area and then they're lifted above the dam. And I'm not aware of any Atlantic salmon ever being seen passing Pajevscott Dam. I could be wrong, but I'm not aware of any.
All right, thank you, Tom.
Do you have any questions?
Then you are cut off.
I noticed that you did not apply for stewardship funds. That's a newer program that we have at LMF, and I just wondered, we're kind of interested in how that, works with various applicants. I'm wondering why you decided not to apply for stewardship funds.
In all honesty, we know we've been pretty aggressive as a municipality in trying to access Land for Maine's future bond monies over time. We've been a very fortunate municipality to be able to gain those funds to help us acquire some pretty special places. We have the financial capacity to steward this additional property, and that's why we didn't make an additional request.
Thank you. Okay. So is there a motion for this project?
Commissioner, do we need a motion to accept the match,
I don't think so.
to excuse
Oh, to waive the.
to waive
it's more than 2
the
years
length of
I
time?
don't think you did last time. You didn't do it
Okay.
with Mary Meeting Park. You
Alright,
just
just
understood it and you
curious.
approved it.
Go ahead, Barbara.
I move that we accept the Pajevscott Reservoir Access, Androscoggin River Water Access proposal as a finalist with a preliminary allocation of $357,500, subject to standard LMF conditions.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Pass on, or I'll continue on with this reverse way of calling the question, and anybody in opposition to the motion? Okay, seeing none, the motion carries. Great. All right, Jason, I think you're up next.
Yep, so next up is Springside Farm, which is a 454 acre dairy farm in New Vineyard. This was a round 11 farming proposal, selected as a finalist in 2023. About 100 acres of field and 250 acres of commercially managed forest. The hilltop, which is from the first slide, is very beautiful up there. And we now have an appraisal, which for the value of the easement at $300,000. I'll make a note that Maine Broadband Trust is asking that the award be increased from the preliminary amount of 145 to up to 150 to maintain the 50% LMS or working farmland share. But so there's first draft motion for you there.
Any questions? Barbara?
I move we approve the recommendation of the LMF Appraisal Oversight Committee and accept the appraiser's value of $300,000 for the project parcel.
Right? Any discussion on that motion?
Second.
I don't think so. It's a committee.
That's right, yeah.
Okay. Anybody opposed to the motion? Carries?
And public notice went in the Economic Journal on March 15th. We received no comments. So we have the second motion there, and Laura has assured me that we have the $5,000 available to bump that funding up to 150,000.
We do. Back to the question of how you want to do your interest, but yes, we have the money and interest. Yes, we do.
So I move that we confirm the allocation of $150,000 in working farmland funding to support the Springside Farm acquisition, subject to standard conditions.
And I do need a second for. Second. Okay. Any discussion? Anyone opposed to the motion? Unanimous? In support? Great.
Yeah.
And then on to access improvement grants.
Yes, and this is our second meeting with this new process of taking these applications on a rolling basis. And the first meeting where we have more than one such application. So I've taken the approach here of a very sort of high level overview of what these requests are. I'd appreciate any feedback from the board as far as the appropriate level of detail for each of these and sort of how you want to structure these in the meeting, because this will be a regular agenda item going forward. What we have here is 6 requests, Rumford Community Forest, Sears Mall McClellan, Ware Lake, Cross Lake, Staples Property, Three Ponds, One Forest, and Whitney Forest. And your board packet has a little bit more detail on that. So are there any questions about any of these proposals?
No, but with the chair's permission, I have to submit an anecdote. About this time last year, I was down on the island of St. John, and my wife, who was a big chatter, got going with a couple of women that we'd never met before.
Did you say your wife?
And one of those,
Like she's talkative?
I'm sorry,
Did you say your wife was?
chatty,
Chatty.
chatty, more so than
Okay,
me.
okay.
But one of the women that we confronted while waiting for dinner time, at this little tiny resort was the mother of the guy who put forth the Rumford Community Forest project. And then last year sometime, we were driving home from somewhere up north and we're going through Rumford and I said, let's go see this thing.
Oh,
And so all we found was the beginnings of an access road that was shorter than this room. So that's my whole history and I apologize for bringing it up. But small world, I love it.
Barbara?
To your question, Jason, I guess, how much more detail could you give us here?
I mean, I could show you a trail map, a proposed trail map for every one of these if you wanted to look at them.
Okay, so there are maps that.
Most of the proposals included maps. A couple of them were not quite locked into the map. They knew they needed the money for the project.
Mhm.
I could go into more detail. A lot of, on each project. I don't know, It's kind of up to the board. What do you, how do you want to
No,
use your time?
I just wondered about your process and how much you had interacted with the applicants and.
Yeah, so whenever, because these funds have already been set aside.
Yeah.
For each project, what we ask, they send us an application with a project budget and a description of the work that they're proposing to do. If they have maps available, things like that, they send those along with that. What we do at the staff level is we review that to make sure that what they are proposing to do and what they are proposing to spend the money on is consistent with the purposes of the project and with the guidelines that we've set for using this access improvement money. And then after we've done that, we bring it to you.
Pretty straightforward.
It's a very straightforward process.
Yeah.
And we did review all of these and they all met the guidelines and they all have at least 1-to-1 match, either in the form of their own expenditures on the access improvements, or in the case of 3 Ponds 1 Forest, they are planning to do that, but if the improvements come in under budget, they would like to use excess match from the acquisition phase as match, which we allow for these. So the stewardship awards, you, the board, have adopted the policy that you really want to see that match be their stewardship money, but the access improvement, I think we're more open to using excess acquisition match.
Yeah. Thank you.
We do have a draft motion for you there.
I move we award a total of $104,580 in access improvement funding to the 6 applicants in the amounts requested.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the project? Anybody opposed to the motion? All right, motion carries.
Thank you.
Oh. PFAS update for farmland. PFAS. Okay.
Let's see.
I'll start.
Welcome to mirror me if you'd like. Good morning, everybody. My name is Nancy McBrady. I'm Deputy Commissioner at the Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation and Forestry. I am here today with my colleague Beth Valentine to talk to you all about PFAS and the ways in which we have created a program, actually 2 programs within the department over the last several years. The intent is to give you a quick summary of how we operate, what we're seeing, some trends, some results, and to give you a solid understanding of the resources and knowledge available within the department to work with farms facing PFAS contamination. And ultimately, to the extent that there is or are properties within the LMF and Working Farmland Access Protection Program orbit, that we are here to be of assistance and to provide counsel and really work through all the issues that may arise, to give folks assurance of investment of these tax dollars, these public dollars, and investments going forward. So I'm going to make some assumptions before I dig in, which are that you generally are aware of PFAS, what they are, how they enter our environment and on farms, what the health concerns may be, and maybe a little bit of the background as to how we as a department started working with PFAS circa 2019. But along the way, if there are any questions, certainly feel free to pipe up and ask. We'll be happy to answer them for you. But with that preface, I just will go to the next slide and talk you through really what we do and how we do it. Ultimately, we have a broad goal, which is really protecting and balancing the interests of public health by identifying PFAS contamination in our food system, working to reduce or eliminate that PFAS, also while looking for ways to assist and support impacted farmers. So that's a 2-pronged approach.
And I'm really going to be speaking in depth today about that technical and financial assistance for farmers. We've come a really long way from the first farm that we found within this administration in 2020 to now, March of 2025. We are a fully operating PFAS response program with robust funding through legislative and Governor Mills' support. We have 7 full-time staff. We have 2 part-time consultants, and with all of that, a robust range of expertise. We have spent over $3 million with farms. That runs the range of very robust sampling on farms, paying for those tests and lab costs, to investments on those farms to help them make shifts to manage around PFAS. We have over 30,000 staff hours and we collect a lot of samples. We're probably going to be over 4,000 soon enough. All this to say, again, we have built a robust system and program that interacts with 3 other agencies on a consistent basis. We are not doing this in isolation. We work with Department of Environmental Protection, we work with IFW, and we also work with the Centers for Disease Control and their toxicologists very, very regularly. Next slide. So what we've learned, and I was glad to come in during that presentation with respect to the very slight amount of PFAS that was detected at that location in Brunswick, and the reference to DEP. There is, as you know, a map that has been made available on DEP's website of the locations where there were licensed disposal of areas throughout the state, both for sludge and septage, sludge being the byproduct of the wastewater treatment plants throughout the state. DEP, you may know, has taken that list, that looked very closely at it, and they've created a tiered process of prioritization of going out and investigating across the state, because under state statute, they have to investigate all sites that accepted the sludge, aka biosolids, and test those locations for groundwater and soil contamination by the end of this year. That's a lot of sites, so they prioritize them tier 1 through tier 4. Tier 1 being the locations that accepted the greatest volume of biosolids, or the locations that accepted biosolids with industrial inputs. And then they go down from that all the way to tier 4, which is where they need more information, likely the least amount of risk. DEP we are now well into tier 3. And along the way, whenever there is a commercial farm that is identified as the subject location, our PFAS response program joins along and starts working with those farms. So that's a long way of addressing that first bullet of the tiered approach. And if there's a few things that you can take away from this conversation today, is that while every farm is going to be different and every farm is going to have varying levels of impacts, what's really interesting and very, very inspiring for us now, many years in, is that the vast majority of these farms are able to work with PFAS and continue to operate safely. It does not come without problems and difficulties and a great length of time and struggle, but because of the technical and financial assistance that we and other partners are able to bring to bear, many of these farmers are able to make operational changes to attempt to try and continue farming. To date, we have worked with 90 farms that do have varying levels of contamination. That is a sizable number, but of that 90, we have had 5 close and 3 have to reduce their operations as a result. And again, there's over 7,000 farms in the state of Maine. We are confident that while we will find more farms, it is not going to be the majority of farms that are facing PFAS. So anyway, I think we have found, because of the work that we've done to date, that we're bullish that we're starting to turn the tide. And because of the information that we have gathered and the learnings that we have gathered and able to apply those to the farms that we find now. If we go to the next slide, what's interesting and further back up to what I was just saying is that between 2020 and 2022, we were finding farms in that tier 1 orbit that were heavily contaminated. And those were the ones that have resulted in real challenges that we've had to work through, and some are continuing to work through. And of those farms, a few also have had to close or made the decision to close. But as we've gotten further out and away from those tier 1 sites, we are finding that the levels of contamination are dropping. And so this is a DEP slide on the right. They have just in January released their second report to the legislature about their investigation and results across the state. I highly recommend you all look at it if you'd like to learn a lot more about what they're doing. But ultimately, this is showing the levels of PFAS contamination distributed through the tiers tested to date. And tier 3 is not done yet, and tier 4 has barely begun. But it is rather revealing to find that as we get away from sort of that epicenter of level tier 1 farms, the contamination levels are dropping, which means there are more options at these farms. Yeah, absolutely.
Question. So if I can see that N equals, is that 437?
Yes.
Thereabouts on the bottom?
Yeah.
So you've tested 437 farms, of which 170 or so in tier 1?
Those are not all farms.
Or tests.
Yeah, those are locations. Just as an aside, DEP's charge is again to test wherever those land applications occurred, many of which are residential. So a lot of these are going to be homes that have private wells, for instance. So a lot of these are private well drinking water or soil.
Staff then represents just the number of sites that were contaminated out of that farm.
Correct. DEP believes as of right now that based on the historical record, there's about 1,300 sites in total that may have accepted the historical biosolids, the licensed sludge. And that's writ large, any type of property.
So just curious on your tier 3 and 4, much smaller levels, but like your tier 4,
It's
like 4,
Yeah.
and it looks like probably 4 were contaminated. I mean, so, you know, it's a small sample size, but a high percentage.
That's true. And it's a long chain PFAS, so that might have been a PFOA or PFOS. They're dynamic. And the tier 4 has several hundred sites to continue to be sampled.
They'll
Yeah,
have to be sampled this year.
Well, I do believe that Commissioner Loitham has notified the legislature that in all reality, that they're going to have to extend into 2026.
I just put an emphasis on something that was said earlier. And again, Nancy, you touched on it, but that map that DEP has put together there, that indicates where sites were licensed for application. And that does not mean that all of those sites had applications. So that's part of what DEP is sorting out as they go, is where was it really applied and where was a permit just pulled and never acted upon.
And Nancy said 7,000 farms in Maine. Is that what you said?
Yes.
How many of those farms had applications or, I mean, we're clearly not all farms are in danger here.
Right, that's correct. So again, we're following the paper trail of historical licenses. And of the 1,300 sites that are ultimately tested, we are going to work with any that are identified as working farms. And to date, it's been those 90 that we have found detectable levels above the drinking water standard within the state, the 20 parts per billion of 6. And we also have these thresholds that have been calculated for us by the CDC that are slightly conservative. They're based on hypothetical dairy, farms that are either sourcing entirely from grass or a mix of corn, grain, and grass. And so it's those soil levels that are high enough to impact the uptake of the soil, of the grass and the grain that trigger that result, and then us working further with those farms.
Have all 7,000 farms been tested?
No, no, again, we're going off of where we can verify that sludge was
Likely or actual?
was actually. And well,
Actual.
some is lost to time, right? So, you know, if there's, you know, a constellation of reasons why we think that we should be testing there, we're gonna work with the farm to say we have suspicions that this did happen.
Who has the final say of, go shut this down?
If the product is either milk or beef, we have action thresholds that we have adopted with the input and the calculations of Maine CDC. So if milk exceeds a certain level or beef exceeds a certain level, we will issue a stop sale order, asking that, well, ordering that farm to remove those items from sale. And that is when we then work with the farm to bring those down. Interestingly enough, while we have not issued further action levels to date on other categories, which is something that we will be doing going forward, but we have had a desire, or let me rephrase that, we've had many farms that have found levels of contamination that have voluntarily withdrawn their products. And CDC has worked with them to test and look and say, yeah, you know what, that was probably in your best interest. Let's work with you, with DEP, with DACF to figure out how to mitigate. So even though we have not established tolerances for every product under the sun, I think that there has been to date a real interest and desire from impacted farmers to obviously not sell anything of concern. And we are more than happy and prepared to work with those farms to bring down either the levels in that product or find a way to grow it elsewhere or grow something different.
What about like chickens and eggs and vegetables?
That's a really good example. So vegetables, we've been working on leafy greens, for instance. That's something that we have garnered a lot of experience with a couple of produce producers. Chickens and eggs are definitely in our ambit. It's as someone said, chickens are weird. And we're taking a lot of tests. We're working, you know, looking at soil, looking at feed, looking at water, looking at seasonality, looking at the kinetics, the age of these animals, but there's still a little bit more work to do and research to be done to help figure out exactly what the appropriate mitigations are.
What are mitigation strategies that really work?
Yeah.
Sure, I've got another slide on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you have a question in the back?
That was my question.
Oh, okay, sure. Well, so here are some of the things, and I'm gonna get to that ultimate question. You know, 4 years in now, we know that not all PFAS are gonna operate the same in the environment or in an animal or in a product. For instance, in a cow, there's a PFOA PFAS compound that they just excrete really quickly. It does not really accrue in their tissue, but PFOA could be an issue in another product instead. So it's just, we're taking a lot of time to look at those results to see, you know, what is of the greatest concern. And it's not always the same, I guess is my ultimate point. Animals are able to depurate, detoxify. On the right, this graph is showing a dairy farm that went from about 800 parts per trillion of PFOS in its milk all the way down to just around non-detect. It did take nearly 2.5 years to do that. And we now understand why there were peaks and valleys. That's about 70 samples of that milk on that farm. We brought in clean feed. We determined that the water was not an issue. But we also found that animals that even are dried off and fed clean feed, when they freshen, when they have calves, the PFAS comes back pretty intensely right off the bat for a little while. So yeah, like, these are the things that we're tracking and kind of finding out and trying to work around. That's what I mean about mitigate. Sometimes it's You just gotta go through these exercises to kind of figure out, oh, now we know that that's happening. Shouldn't feed that to the calves right away, et cetera. So it's developing these things as they go. We also know that the uptake of PFAS is going to differ among the species of the products. So these are not these are results that have been noted by our staff and also with CDC. And as you can see, you know, the leafy greens are really accumulating more PFAS, PFOS, where these other products on the left aren't. I'm not a biologist. I'm not, but we have, and Director Valentine will be able to talk about the research that we're supporting through the PFAS fund, and really trying to accrue more information about why some plants are more inclined to uptake PFAS and where versus not. Another way of saying it is, for instance, we're knowing that the grains, particularly corn and in the kernels, really don't seem to take up very much whatsoever. And as you go further and further down the stalk, it's going to accrue. And so you feed dairy cows snaplage and earlage and various component parts. And so our staff are finding if you cut higher, if you mix this, if you avoid that, you're going to be able to, you know, it gets really complicated, but it is, I mean, we take it as a win as we learn what these best practices are. So we'll go to the next slide. A little bit busy this is what we do when we get there. We have some staff members who go out and really work with the producer to understand the farm operations, what they do, how they do it, really get a feel for how they were operating before PFAS was detected. Based on all of that, we create a sampling plan. And I think it's really important to note that if sludge may have been applied on the field, you know, we're going to be looking all over that field, even though it's not necessary that sludge was spread on all four corners, but we've just got to do our due diligence to figure out where that might have happened. And it's not just where the historic license says it might have been applied. You know, we're looking elsewhere and we're looking at the whole farm, especially if they're sourcing feed from it. So we're going to go out and try and find the clean feed sites, because that's going to be really relevant, because that might be an alternative that they need to lean into and perhaps no longer use more heavily contaminated.
This feels like a really dumb question, but the difference between organic and non-organic farms?
Working with all, and it does not have much of a difference. Okay. Yeah. I mean, well, that was a sweeping statement. Whether or not it's an organic practice or a conventional farm, I think does matter, particularly with dairy, because there are organic requirements for pasturing that are very relevant. And if a dairy is not able to pasture for a certain amount of time, because of the fact that where they pasture is highly contaminated, that can have a really horrible impact to that farm. And in fact, we did have a farm run into that. So I think when I first was answering your question, we worked with either type of farm, but those operational practices can have a real impact depending on what's being grown or produced and the levels of contamination and where. I'll just want to briefly mention, you know, a couple of years ago, lab wait times were months. We have had some investment within the state, which is great for some certified labs that are still taking maybe 2 to 4 weeks for certain things, but there's a better cadence and we're getting results in a more timely fashion, which is really helpful. We look at the results and we talk with our counterparts at CDC, the toxicologists. They have been really wonderful partners to work with. And based on what we're finding, we come up with those recommendations for the farms and can provide financial assistance if that mitigation can't be made without infrastructure investments or other input acquisitions, et cetera. And we do recognize that this is a real, incredibly stressful situation for farms to be in for their own health, their family's health, their workers' health. And so we have some wonderful partner organizations. that have been helpful, and then Director Valentine will speak to that as well going forward. I don't know if I missed it or not. I want to acknowledge that we work very closely with and are very thankful for the assistance and cooperation of the Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association, MOFGA, as well as Maine Farmland Trust. They have set up an emergency fund that helps farmers with financial assistance as well, and they've been great partners, as has University of Maine and Cooperative Extension for research in particular. So moving on, I'm getting close to the end. Here's some mitigation and recommendation examples. They're again, not earth shattering, but they have come through trial and error. Sometimes, particularly for farms such as dairy or beef, you need to label your feed sources because based on the levels of contamination that have been detected, you might actually be able to cycle it through depending on the size of your herd, the age of your herd, when you want to process. We take blood samples that we're able to estimate based on the type of feed and the levels of feed that they're accessing when those levels will drop. The CDC has been working with some researchers in Australia to create a methodology to forecast these beef tissue and beef management techniques, which is really pretty amazing. And they're going to be publishing that nationally very shortly. So that type of infrastructure is being built out as a management activity. This little graphic on the right shows a bunker that is where they would be storing their hay or their silage, where we found in the past, and if you remember that graphic of the milk going down for that dairy hotspot, we traced it back to areas from 1 or 2 hot fields that had gotten stuffed into the back of the bunker. And instead, if you're able, again, to label and know where your highest fields are, to layer it through, you're going to actually dilute the overall feed and exposure to the animals. And then focusing production on plants with lower uptake or ornamental crops, we find we're able to give that by testing the water, testing the soils, looking at what they are growing, whether or not they can make adaptations on their farm, find cleaner soils or locations, or we can, maybe modify some of their infrastructure. So next slide. This is a kind of busy slide, but I think it's relevant, particularly for future farms. This is just going to show how much research we do and testing we do. This is a small beef operation where we tested all of their pasture and hay fields. We were able to determine where the PFAS was and the most highest locations to avoid or to avoid mostly. And then we also did water. And so basically, by having this information and kind of plugging it into the dynamics of the farm, we know which fields to utilize for what and when. Again, because our goal is to kind of work with the challenge of PFAS and try and find ways to remain viable. PFAS does not have to be the end of a farm, but we've got to do the work in order to connect all those dots and give that blueprint to that farm operation. And I think we've got one more slide, maybe. Okay, so where does this lead us? I mean, ultimately, that very brief overview is meant to let you know of what we do on a daily basis and the level of rigor and investigation that we bring to a farm in the effort of trying to keep that operational and make the pivots that may be necessary. If and when there is PFAS, we want to be able to find a way to information share, provide counsel, resolve concerns with LMF staff, and really create a plan for moving forward, or where we have really serious concerns, we will flag that along in that process. It's a very time-consuming, but also nuanced process at the end of the day. This is not a black and white world in which we operate for PFAS. So much of this depends on the farmer herself, their level of interaction and desire to keep farming, and maybe that's something that can speak to. And it's just a dynamic give and take. I wish I could say we follow these 3 steps and it's resolved, but there's a lot of nuance and variables that we contend with. But hopefully you have a little bit of a better understanding of what we're accomplishing or attempting to accomplish. And happy to answer any questions.
That's a good explanation.
Great, great.
I just thought I'd be blanket.
It's like I said, the highest levels of contamination were on a handful of farms that have had a really tough time. And that is really where we were, kind of in the fire and have learned and moved from and are applying our learnings to these other farms that fortunately have less contamination. I also think that if we were able to go back in time with what we know now, we might have been able to respond a little more rapidly. Who knows? But I do think that despite the headlines that we read about Maine and whatnot, we're making progress. And I think we're going to continue to make progress.
I just have one. Yeah, and not only that, but I just want to say that, when we talk to our colleagues in other states and Nancy and Beth do a lot of that and have been doing a lot of that for years now. We really are seen as being, leading on this issue. And what we have been able to learn and what we have been able to apply with that knowledge is really helping other states tremendously. And really that Maine is seen as a leader on this. And I think the story that we're telling at the national level now is not doom and gloom. It is, we feel like we've got our arms mostly around this. We know that we have tools that we can use to help these farms move forward. And really, we're light years ahead of where we were a few years ago. And so it's more of a success story than it is a story of, emergent tragic issues. I think we've been able to figure a lot out.
It's amazing, just like a few years. I mean, kudos to you all, because it was when this first came out, it was just so devastating, and it's amazing how much progress we made so quickly. Fascinating.
Wow.
So if we had never spread sludge, is it fair to say we wouldn't be having this PFAS problem? This is all because of sludge being spread.
The farms that we are finding do have a tie to land application. However, it is possible, and other states in particular have found it, that groundwater contamination through AFFF at Air Force bases, et cetera, have contaminated the water supply and contaminated. There's a dairy in New Mexico, for example, that went through a terrible situation. But in Maine, predominantly, I think biosolids does seem to be the vector.
The reason I ask is we've talked a lot about mitigation and identification and things, and I just wondered if there was any attention given to preventing some other type of contamination with forever chemicals. Are you even thinking about that? So it makes me think, well, what else could we do here? We learned like we shouldn't wear Gore-Tex because it has all those forever chemicals. So we're switching fabrics. And so is there any reasonable way to think about prevention?
Yes, there is. And in fact, 2021 and 2022 were very active years in the Maine legislature, and they passed a bill that I call the PFAS and Products Law that has been amended subsequently, but ultimately by 2032, products with intentionally added PFAS in them may no longer be sold in Maine. There are some carve-outs for manufacturing component parts, automobile, airplane, some medical devices, etc. But for the most part, cosmetics, household appliances, or everyday items, Gore-Tex, clothing, rugs, no longer allowed to be sold in the state of Maine if they contain PFAS. So getting upstream and getting it out of the products is something that we're doing. And other states are passing laws to that effect too. food packaging, et cetera. So that's a really, you know, if we can get it out of the product stream to begin with, we're going to hopefully be ceasing future problems, relative to PFAS.
Every state in the country affected by it.
No, but I feel as though there's a handful of states that have passed similar laws with sort of PFAS in products, and it's gaining momentum. I think there's several dozen PFAS bills across the country and state legislatures that are on deck.
And I'll add that the land application of biosolids is a common licensed practice throughout the country. So you asked if other states are impacted. They likely are, but most aren't looking.
Beth, why don't we segue to you?
Sure. It's okay, I'll cover it. Thank you.
Jason can take it.
I would make it.
Yeah. Slides.
Oh, no, I have to move the slides. I'm sorry, your
All right.
computer.
Just poking.
Things are happening.
So I'm Beth Valentine. I'm the director of the PFAS Fund. The PFAS Fund is housed in the Commissioner's office. We build upon and augment the work of the PFAS Response Program, which is housed within the Bureau of Agriculture, Food and Rural Resources. So we're sister programs within the same department. The fund was established in July of 2022 with bipartisan support from the legislature, included in Governor Mills' budget, and allocated $60 million to support farmers impacted by PFAS contamination. We work with an advisory committee that makes recommendations to the department regarding the administration of that fund. We went through a strategic planning process, followed by a rulemaking process, and began implementation just about a year ago. The PFAS Fund has 4 primary components: direct financial assistance, research, health, and land purchases and stewardship. And I'll spend most of my time on the land purchases and stewardship because that's most relevant to this group. But I will, if you'll please advance, I'll talk about the other components as well. So the financial and technical assistance, we work very closely with the PFAS Response Program. So for somebody applying from the outside, they don't need to know which group within DACF administers the funds. We have a single master application. Impacted producers can use that to apply for income replacement, equipment, infrastructure, et cetera. They fill out the application, submit it to the department. We'll sort out which group processes it. We also have a PFAS response kit. This is a binder. It's also available on our website. And it is a summary of resources, both from the public and private sector, to assist farmers impacted by PFAS. Technical assistance, information about accessing mental health support, accessing health insurance, et cetera. We have worked with Maine Cooperative Extension to establish a navigator program. These are professional handholders. As Nancy indicated, and as I'm sure you can well imagine, learning that your property has been impacted by PFAS can be overwhelming. And just identifying the resources that you're eligible for, completing the application, identifying, where to go to get information, to get documentation, can be overwhelming. So the navigators, they are trained mediators through Maine Cooperative Extension's Maine Agricultural Mediation Program. So they are used to dealing with people in stressful situations and resolving difficult situations. I don't think our master application is difficult, but even still, if you're a person who works with your hands, filling out paperwork, just, it's not your thing, the navigators can assist with that. And our QR code, we have a ton of information on the website, both the mitigation strategies that Nancy has described, the PFAS response tools that are available, as well as information about the PFAS fund. Next, please.
Is there any federal component to this fund?
We do have a grant from USDA, $5 million. So we have the 60 million from the state, 5 million from USDA. To date, we've been able to draw on that USDA grant. But 1.2 million we have spent drawn from USDA for financial support to farmers. So primarily income replacement payments. We also have administrative cost grants, which compensates farmers for partially compensates them for time spent in that initial investigation, working with DACF staff, communicating with their customers, etc. We support infrastructure projects above 150,000 PFAS response, projects below 150,000. Again, it doesn't matter to the person on the outside which of us is making that decision. That's just kind of the split internally. We can also support professional services like business planning. So for example, a farm has worked with the PFAS response team. The PFAS response team has identified management strategies. They may recommend that, maybe beef is a better alternative than dairy, but does that make sense financially? Like, what additional infrastructure is needed? What are the operating costs? What is, assuming the change is technically feasible, that the producer is interested in making this change, then we need to know, is it a good use of public funds on a project, so that hopefully for the long term, that farm will remain viable. So that's why we pay for things like business planning. And we can also assist with new loans. So if a lender is concerned that, because of PFAS, the farm is a risky bet, we can pay for insurance on that loan, for example. Next, please. So research. The PFAS Fund supports research to support, facilitate, and share research that helps farmers determine their best options for maintaining and enhancing viability despite the presence of PFAS on their property. So we are coming to the end of our first solicitation for research grant proposals. We had 4 categories. So looking at transfer through water and plants, through animals and animal products, mitigation strategies, and remediation strategies. So those are the 4 broad categories. These are grants between $100,000 and $500,000. The applications mainly from research institutions. We have just completed the peer review stage. So mid to late April, we'll be announcing that first round of awards. We are also developing a targeted research grant program, which will emphasize collaboration between farmers and researchers. These will be smaller dollar value up to $100,000. The research arm of the PFAS Fund also focuses on communication. So translating, this is part of the program that still needs to be built out, but translating those research findings for various audiences, as well as facilitating communication among research institutions in the department, matchmaking between farmers who are willing to support research and researchers who are looking for a place to conduct their research, or maybe they need some contaminated media, soil or milk, whatever, for their studies. So we help make those connections. Next, please.
You mentioned farmers, but Nancy also mentioned that some residential people are affected by this. Is this exclusively, these services exclusively available to farmers, or if a individual had a well that found PFAS in it, would they be able to avail themselves of these services?
So the financial assistance is for commercial farms. The results of the research will be broadly applicable. Testing of well water, DEP through their tiered testing, they're definitely testing private residential wells. The health programs that I'm going to speak about momentarily, Individuals whose wells exceed the enforceable drinking water standard, so that 20 parts per trillion, combination of 6 PFAS in the drinking water. If that contamination can be linked back, reasonably linked back to the land application of biosolids, then those individuals are eligible for blood testing supported by the PFAS fund and access to mental health services. So physical health. The PFAS fund, we are establishing a blood testing program. I am in the contracting phase. Hopefully roll the program out later this spring. Eligible individuals, so like I said, non-farm residents, farmers and farm workers who meet the eligibility criteria will have access to free PFAS blood serum testing. This test without insurance costs about $600. That is a barrier for many families, you know, that's $600 per test. So if you have a family of 4, that's over $2,000. The results of that blood test can hopefully be reassuring, but if not, if there are elevated levels, there are steps that an individual can take to reduce their body burden. Within Maine, there are 2 medical facilities that have approved protocols for treatment with a cholesterol medication, cholestyramine, which helps people to excrete PFAS to reduce that body burden. But even in the absence of that treatment, knowing that an individual has elevated levels of PFAS in their body puts them at greater risk for certain conditions. But if their primary care providers know they have this elevated risk, they can monitor using routine testing like a kidney function test, a thyroid function test, to hopefully catch conditions before they become problematic. So having that blood testing is really important so people can make decisions about their health. So the PFAS fund within DACF, we're supporting that blood testing. We're also supporting Maine CDC to make the blood test results notifiable. So this is similar to pediatric blood testing for lead testing for children. Those results will be reported to CDC. If there are elevated levels, toxicologists from CDC can follow up and offer advice to those individuals and their treating physicians. CDC is developing educational resources for clinicians and the public. They are conducting a farmer and farm worker soil exposure study to try to identify at what level of soil contamination does that become a concern for ingestion, inhalation, or dermal contact, skin contact. And this 4th bullet I've already mentioned, exploring treatment options for people to reduce their PFAS burden levels. Next, please. The PFAS fund is also developing a suite of mental health support services. We've contracted with an organization to consult on options for this program. We are looking to provide one-on-one supportive counseling, peer support to help ease that emotional burden, wellness and related trainings, web-based resources, and potentially a hotline. There are existing hotlines, so we're kind of like weighing, do we need a new one or do we just tap into an existing resource? Next, please. And then the final element of the PFAS fund are real estate purchases. We will purchase property in fee simple from willing property owners. We purchase at the fair market value as if it is not contaminated with PFAS. So we ask our appraisers to assume a hypothetical situation. The seller can choose to sell all of their property or just a portion. It's up to them. DICF pays the due diligence and closing costs, and the sellers pay liens and taxes. The eligibility criteria include that the property has confirmed PFAS contamination, so above the water above that 20 ppt, or soil above a screening level. So 6.4 parts per billion for PFAS in soil. That many farms, as Nancy was describing, are still able to operate with levels of soil that exceed that threshold. So it's repurchase properties that the landowners want to sell, not because they can't be farmed, but because the farmer has made the decision they don't want to continue on that property. So we offer them an opportunity to sell that property as if it was not contaminated and move on and hopefully farm a different property. The process is initiated by the landowner who reaches out to the PFAS fund. It's a fairly short application, 6 pages, although we ask for basic information about the property, copy of the deed, information about lien holders, etc. We review the application with the advisory panel. We have criteria that we're looking at. The level of contamination, have they been on the property prior to the discovery of PFAS, natural resource values, agricultural soils, etc. With the consent of the advisory panel, we then move on to the appraisal stage. We share, and again, we ask the appraiser to adopt that hypothetical. We share the results of the appraisal with the landowner. If they're comfortable with the proposed price, we enter a purchase and sales agreement. We conduct due diligence, and at the same time, we're thinking about future uses of this property. Where possible, we want to preserve use of this property for agriculture in the future. We move to closing. After closing, we will be enrolling the properties in DEP's Voluntary Response Action Program. This provides liability protection to the landowner, which is really more valuable for the subsequent landowner, not so much for DICF. It also places restrictions on the deed that will be recorded at the relevant registry of deeds, identifying restrictions on the property. Yes. So at least one of the property in the pipeline cannot be used for residential use in the future. Other properties are not nearly as contaminated, and the restrictions are going to be considerably less restrictive. Next, please. So we closed on our first sale in February. We have 2 others that have been appraised. Verbally, the landowners have indicated that they've accepted those appraisals. Each of those 2 entities have purchase and sale agreements that they are reviewing, and we hope to execute those in the relatively near future. I've already mentioned that our goal is to return these properties to agricultural production whenever possible. So either through sale to a new private owner or through a lease with the department. When returning to agricultural production is not an option, we look at opportunities for research, conservation, recreation, and education. And I believe that is my last slide.
Yes, any questions, Barbara?
Is there a site, an agency, or a organization that keeps track of every single farm per force that has been identified in any way, shape, or form? Town or county or state?
So just a list of contaminated properties. We have that information within the department.
So it's here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned an appropriation of 60 million 2 years ago, was it? 2022?
Yep.
Usually there's an anticipation of how long that will last. And I'm wondering what the time frame is for that. And that came out of the general fund.
Yes.
In 2022, times are better in 2022. So these are forever chemicals. I'm assuming we need a forever program. How long does $60 million potentially last you?
Yeah. So during our planning phase, we projected it would last about 5 years. So now we are 1 year into implementation. We haven't been spending quite as quickly as projected, so we're just getting into the land purchases, which obviously are a significant cost. So I haven't rerun the projections, but I think I can safely say, we've got another 5 years.
Good, good. Barbara, also the legislation that established the fund allows for replenishment of the fund through lawsuits.
Through what?
Through private action, through lawsuits. So we do have a lawsuit underway through the Attorney General's office against certain manufacturers, chemical companies that created, the DuPonts of the world, et cetera. So multi-year, very complicated, but in the end, should we be successful, and I hope that we are, because we actually are a state that are going to be able to show natural resource damages. I mean, all of these funds that we're paying out and time spent, we have the receipts, as they say. So ultimately, that can be brought back to the fund. So it hopefully will help replenish our needs at that point. And there's a legislation pending right now this session so that Beth's team, we can purchase these properties, but we can't lease them once they have gone through the process. And, again, if we find that they're perfectly acceptable for certain types of farming or other activities, we'd like to be able to lease them and use that income as well.
And the sale of properties that we purchased, potentially coming back to the fund, back to the program to be recycled.
And do you have your own fund now with that 60 million, and that, like we have an LMF fund with our 40 million? So you have your own discrete fund.
Yeah, it's classified as other special revenue. We don't get interest like you do, but we just draw it down.
Look into it.
You can make that happen.
I had a conversation with the department's business manager, but I'm not sure where to go. I think back to the legislature.
Yeah, and I just want to commend Beth, who got this program up and running in lightning speed, like just to be this far along 2 years after the legislation passed is just incredible. Well, the rulemaking and the consultation, and I think one of the other real bright points about the way that we've done this work is that farmers have been on the advisory committee at the table all along, helping us to understand how, different decisions around resources and how we implement them, making sure that they had a voice in that process.
My sense is, after hearing Nancy and Beth and seeing all the work you've done and seeing the process that you have in place and all the various aspects that you put together, that Maine really is a leader on this. And I can see a lot of demand on your time to do what we call share best practices. A lot of invitations to other states. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A great team to work with.
Being here. Great presentation. Okay.
I also want to say thank you. And I think one of the things that's been really special from the perspective of, I'm a farmer who had a tier 1 property, so I know the system, is the way in which all of the departments have worked together has been incredible. To have the CDC and the DEP and DACF all come together to support farms. And I think as a committee, the important part that I want to convey is the message that every farm is different. So as we continue to look at conserving land, I think the amount we've learned about the impact of PFAS on farms and on the uptake of plants and animals has also been just a huge, huge learning in 2 years. And so I think we shouldn't be dissuaded by seeing those numbers on properties. But I think to other questions about the broader viewpoint, I think, there was a huge spill in Brunswick last year. Nothing to do with agriculture. This has been largely focused on agriculture. But that spill is going to have contaminants on natural lands and waterways. And so we need to be cognizant of how that literal downstream impact is happening on the lands that we're trying to conserve, and the ways in which we independently and collectively as a group use our voice, be aware of that.
Okay, in the interest of time, I'm gonna move us along to staff updates. And thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So, staff changes, you may have noticed David Hediger is not sitting at the table, but Joe Anderson is. David Hediger went back to become the planning director of the city of Auburn. We miss him. We're so glad to have Joe. And no, Joe is from, oh, now I'm confused. Are you there for, no, you're Erica. Joe is for Erica. I'm sorry. I'm having a senior moment. I'm sorry. The main thing is that I have the ad, we got the ad in right away to replace David, or to find someone to sit in his. And we have, I've only read 3 weeks, and I'm glad we had 25 responses. I will get the approved list by the end of the day Friday, so it won't be that many, but it's still a lot. So we're on it. That, and the other big announcement, that you all know, there are cupcakes. This is Julia's last meeting with us for a little while, because she's gonna go away and have a baby. So, Julia. And then my confession and my apologies, I so dropped the ball on the quantitative scoring discussion. I'm so sorry. I remembered that I hadn't done it when I went to make the slides, because I very helpfully put it on the next time slides, and I was like, oh, it's now. And so I promise you will have that at the next meeting when you're getting ready to talk about scoring. The link to the webinar on estuarine resilience, that I was a little unsure whether this was a public link or a private inner board. It was kind of a board, like how to understand our book. So I didn't just put it out there on the website. I think I effectively shared it with everybody who needs to, but if you didn't get an invite, let me know and I'll open the sharing so that you can get it and make sure everybody who was invited, agency staff gets it. Let me know. The stewardship application, I think we're like ready to go on that. We've finished the application, the cover letter, we just need to do the rollout. That's all. And then there's this possible field tour to North Maine woods. Erica, before she left, we were wanting to find a way. I've never been to the North Maine woods. It's kind of nice to go to a place before you talk about, and so I've never been, selfishly. And then she put together this, you'll see it in your materials, in this possible itinerary. She has said that they do, in fact, AMC does in fact have July 23rd and 24th available. This is well beyond your per diems. I don't think the state is going to kick in for all of it. And I also was responding to this sort of the scrum of people after the last meeting, like, hey, we want a field trip. And so I didn't know if the time was right. You really do. This would be some togetherness. But the option of an overnight is there, but you don't have to. It's not the only option. Like, it could just be a 1-day trip up there.
So, the North Maine Woods is a large area.
It's large area. This would be AMC. Yeah, very. Thank you for that. So yes, she's got the, where we meet, we go, we've got this whole program here. It would be exciting, and it's not going to happen unless we tell her that we really do want to do it. And so I want to put this in front of you. And there's a plane that you are on your own for the money, for the plane ride. There's no way I'm getting anybody to write a check to us. I love flying, but I don't think anybody's gonna. So I wanted to share that with you, and not get your firm commitment right here, right now, in the interest of time, but let me know how you feel about this, what you think.
I'm in.
You're it, Roger is in. And then I have less interesting it's interesting to me, status of LD 1072 in your mailed materials. I called it 1052. I don't know why. This is the department's bill to update the land remains future statute. It's an omnibus bill. It has 3 parts. The first part is to do the updates to the statute to bring it into current, along with current practice. The bill, particularly one section, is written as if you all were out there negotiating directly with landowners and acquiring land, for ourselves and on behalf. And so there was a lot of just disconnect. And now we have, like, the rules for funding are very nicely tucked into each program. Water access has its rules, CNR, et cetera. And so the biggest offender in the old statute was the big overarching how the fund can be used language in section 6209. And so that was where a lot of it focused. if you want, Judy, I can quickly go through, and if not, I can just send people, I defer to your time management here. Do you want me to quickly go through?
Yeah,
Okay, all right, this is a summary of the summary. The interest in property used to sit in that large overarching, thing, and this, we brought it into a definition. We thought we can use the definition and lose the rest of that verbiage that's outdated. And then the second one, there was an obligation to provide public notice, but it was not, didn't fit us at all. It was a public notice that was to the landowner back when we weren't committed to willing seller, which I think we've always been committed to willing seller, but the statute is actually written, you don't have to be. And so it was just out of step with how we do it. And so this makes it clearer that we're providing public notice of the board's intent to determine a final award, which is what you're doing at that second stage. You're not acquiring the land, you're determining the final award for that land. Next slide, Jason. Authorizes you to use your discretion. There was a little unfortunate that you must fund things that do this, that, and the other. And like, no, you don't must do anything. You are absolutely. And then there's language about the board can't fund the acquisition of an interest in land for commercially harvested or harvestable forest land. We thought we want to make it clear that's a fee interest, because of course we absolutely fund working forest easements. And then then the second section, next slide. Oh, yeah, we thought it was a good idea to go ahead and put in the statute that they had to have clear title. That would just clear this up, right? And yeah. And then the second part of the bill it goes to Title 33, the land, the conservation and land management part of the statute, that this creates a tool that is very much like the right of first refusal we put in working waterfront covenants. It's fundamentally a right of first refusal called an option to purchase at agricultural value, OPAV. And it's a good tool. We sure do like them in the working waterfront. They're the key to keeping things affordable. And so to try to replicate that here in the agricultural setting it just seemed like a good idea. And it's a thing that our most frequent flyer partner in farmland protection, Maine Farmland Trust, is already wanting to use this. And we couldn't do it until we had a statutory authorization, because it's a perpetual kind of a thing. And you can't do that without some statutory authority. So that's that. And finally, the third part we'll go real fast. We have a conservation easement registry. It's really a conserved lands database registry. And it's not viewable by the public. And so this would allow the Department of Agriculture, Conservation and Forestry is responsible for maintaining this. It would allow the department to move that format from this easement registry, which is really not visible and a little hard, and move it into a GIS map layer that would be visible to the public and to policymakers alike. And so that is a bill that's the next page, Jason, that's okay. You can go one. Yeah, that is the bill that I'll be testifying on Thursday. And I think that brings us up to 8.
Thank you. Any questions for Laura or anyone else on staff? Do we want to spend a couple minutes and just talk about potential additional spending on the interest, or get a kind of a sense for where the board's at on that? I mean, we could also do it after we've scored, and if there's some projects that don't score well, then we don't have an issue. Okay, yeah, okay. So we'll hold the discussion until after the scoring. Okay, then I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So
Wait a minute, could we just, so did we not have a proposal for responding to PFAS as discovered on a WFAPP project?
Proposal?
That was the bullet under 6, and is that being delayed for another time?
I don't have that on.
Oh, no, that was just meant to be what Nancy covered.
Let me,
Proposal, that's not the right way to put
proposal's the wrong word, but I think
Okay,
Sorry.
I thought I had missed
So
some
sorry.
proposal that we
My
were
bad.
supposed to evaluate. And then
Yeah.
just the final question is, how do you want us to, you've given a lot of dates here. If we didn't want to do some field trip, how are we going to come up with?
It needs to be July 23rd to 24th. That I should make very
Okay.
clear.
So those
There
the
are no
only
choices.
dates
No choices.
There are
So
no
There's two
September.
things. Well, I didn't ask her about September.
23rd,
It
24th.
does say, it says September. alternative
Yeah,
dates.
yeah, she did, but I know that July 23rd or 24 is an overnight is available. I didn't find out because I was focusing on July.
And when do you need to know? And is there a number of people that we need in order to do something?
There's a maximum of 12 people
Mhm.
that they can accommodate. And so as soon as you can tell me, I'll tell her.
So what should we
Interested.
try to
You
have
did, I've got Roger.
everybody respond to you by April 1st?
Yeah, as soon as you can, yeah, but and no later than April 1st. Yeah, that's a good idea.
And this is different. Laura Rose Day also
Yeah.
had, I think, more of a day trip in
Yeah.
mind. This isn't excluding that. That still
No.
could be another
No.
option at another point.
That's
This is a separate offer.
That's exactly right. Yes, it is.
Are there other, objectives beyond what's proposed again?
Oh, well, you know.
What's the soft?
So some of it is, we have a lot of conversations about access, about what it's like to be out there, what the roads are like, the condition of roads. One of our recurring title issues is a guaranteed public vehicular access requirement, which is, it's a nice, clear standard. And there are gonna be times when it's challenging, and I think it's a good idea to go and see what the terrain is like. What does this really mean? What does it look like? And the board is required to use its best efforts to obtain guaranteed public vehicular access when possible and appropriate. And so the way we work it as staff is we give that as a hard black and white. You must have, it's got to be perfect legally. And if it's not, you need to do your best to get it to be. And if you can't, that's when it comes to the board to do that discretionary, if possible and appropriate. And so some of the worst roads, and mine are very limited, are in this area of this neck of the woods. And to see what people are, better understand the environment where that is would be my, like, not frivolous, not simply leisure reason to go. And there could be people have other reasons to want to go. And then there's opportunities to observe a working forest easement, which gets me all excited. So to see sustainable forestry in practice, it's a big part of what we want to do. And we're wanting to create policies collectively that help us sequester more carbon. What's smart, what makes sense. So this would just be one little dip in yeah. But it would be fun. It'd be a lot of togetherness. And I'm far more of an introvert than anybody ever thinks. So this is terrifying, actually. Is you bunking with anyone like?
All right, so folks will have their RSVP to Laura by April 1, if we haven't already.
Thank you.
Now I will take the motion to adjourn.
Barbara?
Yeah, good. All those
Second,
in favor or
in favor.
Anybody opposed?
adjourn?
Hey, congratulations. That's good.
You did good.
You did real good.
Only 6 minutes.
Oh, God.
And my first time I graduated.
Yeah, that was such a good one. I was so glad for that.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, we really come a long way.
Oh, wonderful.
Well, like Sarah, before COVID hit, you would have once a year, you would go have the
And I
board
don't know if
meeting.
you've ever been in person. I've been on lots of calls.
And so, yeah. So.
Laura.
Next week.
Some other time.
You're it now, or I can't.
Any negative or? Oh, no, I mean, there's like 7,000 jobs in that.
For DMs, can you get him?
You know what, I'm gonna tell you a story. When I had my confirmation, there were like a lot of rumors before starting.
Thank you. Very beautiful, like, I think.
And like when I got there, I just,
Then I'm gonna come hard.
Absolutely. Unanimous.
Yeah, no, I'm glad.
Gentlemen.
A lot of information.
Yeah, no kidding.
I think
Nothing.
Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah.
I know, I know.
Honestly, I've never like. Just. Your official, hey, you know, something.
No, just you can, I know who you are.
Yeah.
I've been asked that.
I think coming from such a.
That is a partner.
You know, that's.
I will share. And so, yes. Public access.
Wow, that's amazing. Oh my God.
And one of the people that were. No connection.
No connection.